This video is for anyone interested in multimodal transport. The video's purpose is to teach the audience about planning multimodal freight transport systems. Multimodal transport is a new field. The development of multimodal transport systems is the result of the rapid growth of trade in containerized freight. Containers have fundamentally altered freight movement, handling and storage, the size of ships, and the design of transport infrastructure. Containerized freight's cost savings have been great and helped expand world trade. The key ideas are that containers standardize freight transport, simplify storage, save time, reduce costs, and produce great economies. There remain major challenges in terms of designing transport systems that allow containers to move easily from origins on land, through ports, to ships, through ports and land again, to final destinations.
We also need to consider how to move in out things from the port to the final points of destination, port and other connection to the port, including the wall.
Transferring freight between modes was a slow, expensive and risky process before the birth of containerized freight. Containers have replaced the need to carefully load and unload bags, pallets and small cartons of general cargo. Containers reduce the time, labour and paperwork necessary to move goods. Today's large container ships clear ports in a day instead of weeks before. The cost savings are great. The container provides its own storage structure. The individual locked box eliminates theft and removes the need for warehouses. Containers' standardized sizes make stacking quick and save space in both ships and ports. Stacking containers on large ships saves great money. These savings prompt shipping lines to build larger and larger ships. The container revolution has produced new demands on transport systems. Ports must invest in larger cranes and stronger wharves to handle high volumes of containers from larger ships. Ports must invest in storage equipment and space to store large freight volumes and avoid congestion. Transport systems must accommodate more containers, many of them empty. Sometimes empties must be stored outside the port. It is necessary to transport empty containers from destinations back to origins without any revenue to the shipping lines. Multimodal networks arise as regions seek to streamline road, rail, port and ship connections and thus reduce the time between their origins and other destinations. Trucks carry many more containers to destinations on land. Trucks are the lowest cost mode for short and medium distances, while rail is useful for very long hauls. Canals are useful too. The hinterland region behind a port, usually a city, requires a network of roads, intersections and parking places to allow the smooth movement of big boxes on large trucks. Restrictions on designated paths separate large trucks from local traffic. Rail is most useful in transferring freight between a few large high-volume points over long hauls. For long distances, rail is the most economical mode. Canals and rivers also provide connectivity to hinterland, especially where industry has developed along inland waterways. But generally, river depths are insufficient to move containers in large volumes. Canal barges can haul empty containers. The same is true of ferries. Though useful in places, the scale is ultimately limited. The important thing is that transferring containers between ships, ports and land must be quick, smooth and inexpensive. The quicker the transfer and less the congestion, the lower the cost.
Ada yang sudah ada kapal tapi barang belum ada. Nah, bagaimana kita melakukan konsolidasi kargo untuk supaya barang sudah disiap sebelum kapal datang, sehingga acceleration for loading unloading di area pelabuhan kecil itu harus lebih cepat supaya tumpukan barang di pelabuhan besar juga bisa cepat diangkut ke pelabuhan tujuan.
Inland terminals are perhaps the most important development in containerization. As container traffic increases, a shortage of space may arrive within seaports. Storage demands grow as containers await truck, rail, and ships. The result is congestion. Ports address the container space needs by developing inland terminals, sometimes called dry ports, comprising large yards with high-capacity road and rail connections to temporarily store containers off-site. The key notions behind inland terminals are high-volume storage and high-capacity movement. The inland terminal requires strong road and rail connections to the seaport to avoid congestion.
Sebenarnya, kalau dry port itu makin banyak, itu sebetulnya lebih bagus karena bisa merupakan tambahan kapasitas untuk penumpukan kontainer di luar pelabuhan. Karena pelabuhan itu terbatas untuk penyimpanan itu.
Planning a multimodal system represents new challenges. In the past, planners, engineers and decision makers could largely work in narrow disciplines of shipbuilding, port, road and rail development. Multimodal thinking requires coordination, and that is an institutional and cultural change. One of the simplest yet best approaches is to provide users, manufacturers, wholesalers, a voice in multimodal planning. To understand some of the challenges in developing multimodal freight transport systems, let us look at Indonesia. Indonesia is the world's largest island nation, home to 250 million people and the world's 10th largest economy. The island nation uses containers a lot, but the infrastructure outside ports is lacking. In Indonesia, great disparities exist at the regional level. 1/7 of the nation lives on the small islands in the nation's eastern half, but their production represents only 1/10 of the total economy. Incomes are low, production uncompetitive, transport weak, costs high, and poverty extensive. Meanwhile, there is a great concentration of population, production and accessibility in Java and other Western islands. However, Java's large ports are overburdened and congested and have little room to expand. Trucks experience long delays as they enter and exit ports. These ports have effectively no railway, river or canal connectivity. Indonesia's large national maritime network comprises small-scale, infrequent and inefficient shipping services to remote destinations. Ships anticipate long delays to enter port. Once in port, labour gangs responsible for offloading freight are uncooperative, delay operations and drive up costs. Low production in eastern Indonesia forces shipping lines to carry most containers back to Java empty and at a loss.
Oleh sebab itu makanya harus dibuat cara supaya kargo itu bisa di-create di tiap-tiap daerah di Indonesia. Nah sekarang ini belum, terutama Indonesia Timur itu hanya 20% kontainer yang terisi, yang kembali ke Jawa.
Congestion in smaller Indonesia ports is the result of poor handling equipment, limited storage space, trucks waiting long times to enter ports, and stripping. The practice of stripping occurs when stevedores break down containers into smaller truckloads inside the port because the surrounding road system cannot support large container trucks. Stripping requires extra space and blocks paths for other port movements. There are few inland terminals providing rapid movement of containers in and out of ports.
Jadi ada dua hal. Jadi kita propose kepada pemerintah untuk increase the capacity, kekuatan jalan dan lebar jalan. Yang kedua, kita siapkan juga fasilitas di Pelabuhan Kijing berupa CFS dan lain-lain untuk menampung gerakan-gerakan multimodal lainnya.
The current President Joko Widodo understands the need to improve transport connectivity in eastern Indonesia. He envisions a maritime expressway to improve inter-island shipping, reduce costs, promote economic development, raise incomes, lower poverty, and reduce regional disparities. A national shipping network should include high-capacity trunk or pendulum routes, linking large transshipment hubs from west to east, with feeder routes to secondary ports.
Itu kalau mau mendukung tol laut program pemerintah ini bisa lebih cepat. Harus ada kapal-kapal feeder yang banyak.
The Maritime Expressway plans have not yet incorporated multimodal solutions. Improved container ports, yards, road, rail, canal and river connections, parking lots and inland terminals are necessary if the transport system is to deliver goods to final destinations. A holistic approach to a maritime expressway will address the planning and management side, including improved planning for freight transport, multimodal connections from port to land destinations, tariff reforms that ensure port charges cover operating costs and raise capital to invest in expansion, improved project implementation processes, clear responsibility for infrastructure maintenance, operations and investments, information systems, electronic billing and reduced paperwork, better support for logistics companies that move goods.
Look at Indonesia, you can see that almost individual agency, they are only responsible for their part. But I've hardly seen one agency to take care of multimodal approach to the port development and the interconnections.
The potential of containers to provide quick movement of freight between land, water, road and rail origins and destinations are great. As the example from Indonesia shows, the streamlining of freight movement represents many challenges in terms of planning, finances, public and private coordination and regulations.